Welcome to District Deep Dive, where I, a walking encyclopedia of Hunger Games knowledge, deep dive the entire Hunger Games series. Today, I'm covering chapters 12 and 13 in Catching Fire, aka the set of chapters with the announcement that changes everything. Like always, this series does contain spoilers for Sunrise on the Reaping, especially in this episode and next episode. If you're watching the show on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're listening to the show in podcast form, don't forget to rate, review, and follow the show because it really does help with the algorithms. And before I get started, I just want to say there will not be an episode of District Deep Dive next week. I am so sorry. I did not have time to pre-record anything, and I'm going to be on vacation. I just wanted to let you guys know that there will not be a full-length episode next week. But I have not disappeared off the face of the earth again. There's no more black mold, hopefully. To start off, I'm going to do a summary of the chapters I'll be covering. Chapter 12. Winter has begun to withdraw as Katniss continues to heal from her injury. One morning, she wakes to find Vania, Flavius, and Octavia standing over her. Her bridal shoot is finally here after Haymitch got it pushed back several months, which Katniss tries to act excited for. As her prep team works on her, Octavia makes a comment about not being able to get shrimp for a party. The statement tugs at Katniss. When Katniss asks why she hasn't been able to get any, Octavia tells her that they haven't been able to get seafood for weeks because of the bad weather in District 4. Katniss remembers that District 4 was one of the districts she noticed on the Victory Tour where there was an air of barely concealed rage in the crowd, and she's sure this means District 4 has revolted. She casually questions her prep team, and from the antidotes they tell her, Katniss suspects the districts that have begun to revolt are 3, 4, and of course District 8. This knowledge both frightens and excites Katniss. Senna then appears to put the finishing touches on her makeup before Katniss begins her bridal shoot. That evening, after Senna, Effie, and the prep team have left, Katniss realizes that her mother and Prim are overly happy with the photo shoot, with them thinking this means she's safe. The next day, Katniss walks with Haymitch to town. Katniss updating him on everything she's learned since her meeting Bonnie and Twill. Haymitch tells her of rumors that District 7 and 11 have at least attempted to rebel, although he shoots down Katniss's idea of District 13 still being around. That evening, there's mandatory programming, which turns out to be Katniss's bridal shoot. As the special wraps up, Caesar Flickerman tells the crowd to stick around for a big event for the upcoming third quarter Quell. When Prim asks what they'll do since the games aren't for months, Astrid tells them that it must be the reading of the card. As Snow appears and begins to speak, he speaks of the previous 2 Quells. When Snow speaks about the twist of the 50th Hunger Games, Astrid quietly tells her daughters that she had a friend, Maisley Donner, that went that year being the same year Haymitch won. President Snow then moves on to this year, the 75th Hunger Games, and third quarter Quell. He pulls out the envelope with a 75 and reads off this Quell's twist, as a reminder to the rebels that even the strongest among them cannot overcome the power of the capital. The male and female tributes are to be reaped from the existing pool of victors. Astrid shrieks, Prim buries her face in her hands, and Katniss realizes what this means. District 12 only has 3 living victors, 2 male, 1 female. She's going back in the arena. Chapter 13. Katniss bolts out of the house and reaches the fence for the woods before she hears the hum of electricity. Remembering how trapped she is, she turns and takes off again. The next thing she knows, she's in the cellar of an empty house in Victor's village, on her hands and knees. She balls up her shirt and stuffs it in her mouth and screams until her voice is almost gone. As she curls up on the floor, she ignores someone calling her name in the distance and thinks of what is to come. She is going back in the arena, back to the place of nightmares. She wonders if this quarter Quell twist was really written 75 years ago, because it seems too perfect of an answer for the capital. Getting rid of Katniss, subduing the districts, and shattering the illusion of hope that victors represent, all in one blow. Katniss thinks she's glad she only won last year, otherwise she'd know all the other victors. A lot of them are friends. The only friends she'll have to worry about killing will be Peeta or Haymitch. The thought stops her in her tracks. There's no situation she would ever kill Peeta or Haymitch, but one will be going back into the arena with her. Knowing Peeta will ask Haymitch to let him go back in to protect her, Katniss stumbles out of the cellar to Haymitch's house. She finds him already drunk, sitting at the kitchen table. Haymitch tells Katniss Peeta was there before he could snap the seal on a bottle, begging for another chance to go in. And what can Katniss say? She doesn't want Haymitch to die. He's her family. But she also wants Peeta to live. What did she come for? She simply says that she came for a drink. Haymitch bursts out laughing and hands over his half-empty bottle. As she drinks, her and Haymitch discuss Peeta and him wanting to go back in. Haymitch telling Katniss that she could live 100 lifetimes and not deserve Peeta. Katniss doesn't disagree, saying there's no question Peeta is the superior one of their trio. Katniss and him continue their discussion, and she realizes that she isn't just here for a drink. She's figured out what she's asking. If it's her and Peeta in the arena again, this time they try to save him. Katniss sees the pain in Haymitch's eyes, but pleads with him. Eventually, Haymitch agrees. Katniss drunkenly staggers home and opens the door to find Gale, pulling her into a hug. He whispers that they should have gone when Katniss said that it isn't too late. As Katniss looks at her mother and Prim clutching each other, she knows that it is, and she tells him as much before passing out. Katniss awakens the next morning, sick and hungover. When she hears her mother and Prim coming up the stairs, she braces herself and tries to pull herself together and be strong like she was during the goodbyes at last year's reaping. But when they appear in the doorway, she breaks down, and Astrid and Prim comfort Katniss before she falls back asleep. When she awakens again that afternoon, she heads back over to Haymitch's and finds Peeta already there. Peeta has emptied all the liquor in the house and forbid Ripper from selling Katniss or Haymitch anymore. The three argue, Peeta telling them that they can't afford any drunkards on the team. They're going to train like careers, and that two of them are coming home whether they like it or not, before slamming the door. After a few days, Katniss and Haymitch agree to act like careers to help get Peeta ready as well. Over the next few months, Astrid, Prim, Madge, and even Gale assist in getting them ready for the games. One night, when Katniss is walking Gale back, he remarks how it would be better if Peeta were easier to hate. He asks where they would be if Peeta hadn't been in the picture. Katniss gives him the most honest answer she can. In the woods, like every Sunday. And she doesn't want Gale to do anything drastic. But she does plan on telling him a couple things when they say goodbye for what Katniss believes will be the final time. But she never gets a chance. The day of the reaping, Katniss stands alone in a marked-off area, with Peeta and Haymitch to her right in a similar pen. Effie lacks her usual verve as she claws around the girl's reaping bowl that only holds one slip. Then she pulls Haymitch's name, with Peeta immediately volunteering to take his place. They're ushered into the Justice Building, where Thread waits for them with a smile, informing them there's a new procedure. They're taken straight to the train. No cameras, no crowd. Katniss is left staring out the train window, watching District 12 disappear. No goodbyes, either. Now on to world building. So of course I'm going to cover the Quarter Quell. Every 25 years there's a special Hunger Games known as the Quarter Quell. This is to celebrate and mark the anniversary of the end of the Dark Days. Each Quarter Quell has a special twist to it, and supposedly these Quarter Quell twists are written out ahead of time. The twists for the Quarter Quells are written on envelopes that mark that year's Quell, so the 25th, the 50th, the 75th Hunger Games. And Katniss says there's enough envelopes in this box that contains all of them that whoever created the Quarter Quell twist must have planned for the Hunger Games to go on for centuries because there's so many of them. During the year of a Quarter Quell, there's the reading of the card, which several months before the actual reaping, the president takes out the card that was written supposedly years and years and years ago with the twist for that year's Hunger Games. To present the president with the box of Quarter Quell cards, there's a little child dressed in white. This year, there's a little boy that presents it to President Snow. During the 50th Hunger Games in Sunrise on the Reaping, there is a little girl dressed in white that presents President Snow with a box of envelopes. This year, the year of the third Quarter Quell in the 75th Hunger Games, they do the reading of the card after Katniss's bridal shoot special. At this point in the story, there's been two Quarter Quells, the 25th and the 50th Hunger Games, and during the reading of the card, President Snow talks about these previous Quells. For the reading of the card, quote, the anthem ends and President Snow begins to speak to remind us all of the dark days from which the Hunger Games were born. When the laws of the games were laid out, they dictated that every 25 years, the anniversary would be marked by a Quarter Quell. It would call for a glorified version of the games to make fresh the memory of those killed by the district's rebellion. And then President Snow goes on to tell us what happened in the previous Quarter Quells. On the 25th anniversary, as a reminder to the rebels that their children were dying because of their choices to initiate violence, every district was made to hold an election and vote on the tributes who would represent it. On the 50th anniversary, the president continues, as a reminder that 2 rebels died for each capital citizen, each district was required to send twice as many tributes. And that year was the year that Hamish Abernathy won. Snow continues, and now we honor our third Quarter Quell, says the president. The little boy in white steps forward, holding out the box as he opens the lid. We can see the tidy, upright rows of yellowed envelopes. Whoever devised the Quarter Quell system has prepared for centuries of Hunger Games. The president removes an envelope clearly marked with a 75. He runs his finger under the flap and pulls out a small square of paper. Without hesitation, he reads, on the 75th anniversary, as a reminder to the rebels that even the strongest among them cannot overcome the power of the capital, the male and female tributes will be reaped from the existing pool of victors. During the year of the second Quarter Quell, they widen the shot to include President Snow, who intones, and now, to honor our second Quarter Quell, we respect the wishes of those who risked all to bring peace to our great nation. He leans over and carefully selects an envelope marked with a 50 and reads the card inside. On the 50th anniversary, as a reminder that 2 rebels died for each capital citizen, each district will be required to send twice as many tributes to the Hunger Games, 2 female and 2 male. In this doubling of reparations, we remember that true strength lies not in numbers, but in righteousness. I mentioned Katniss's bridal shoot program, so this was a special feature that they did, and they got it together very quickly. At 7:30, right before the reading of the card for the Quarter Quell, Caesar Flickerman hosts the special, and Senna, being Katniss's designer, is a guest. Katniss says, I can see how they could photograph me yesterday and present the special tonight. Initially, Senna designed 24 wedding gowns. Since then, there's been a process of narrowing down the designs, creating the dresses, and choosing the accessories. Apparently in the capital, there were opportunities to vote for your favorites at each stage. This is all culminating with shots of me in the final 6 dresses, which I'm sure took no time at all to insert in the show. Each shot is met with a huge reaction from the crowd, people screaming and cheering for their favorites, booing the ones they don't like. Having voted, and probably bet on a winner, people are very interested in my wedding gown. It's bizarre to watch when I think of how I never even bothered to try on one before the cameras arrived. Caesar announces that interested parties must cast their final vote by noon on the following day, which the capital citizens do end up doing, even though Katniss is obviously going back in the arena. For characters this set of chapters, there's the young capital boy that presents Snow with the cards. He's dressed in a white suit, and he follows President Snow up to the stage for the reading of the card, and he carries the box with the envelopes that mark the special twist for the Quarter Quells. And Maisie Donner. This is the first time we get mention of Maisie, but I'm going to wait to cover her more next episode because we get to meet her more with Katniss and Peeta watching Haymitch's games, or a version of Haymitch's games. And then, of course, I will cover her much more when we actually get to meet her in Sunrise on the Reaping. But this set of chapters is the first time we get mention of Maisie. Onto the deep dive section of this episode. This is where I cover foreshadowing, parallels, symbolisms, discussions, and everything in between. I feel like last episode was kind of a break, as much as you can get in the Hunger Games, with everything that's been going on. We did get, obviously, some stuff with the revolution going on, but Katniss got injured and was laid up in bed. But this set of chapters is really when shit hits the fan. We just dive headfirst back into it. The last 2 chapters were the calm before the storm, and this set of chapters is kind of the beginning of it. We have the revolution is starting. We know that now. It's not just District 8. Katniss is pretty much certain that District 4 has revolted, with Octavia saying, oh, they haven't been able to get seafood in weeks because of the weather in District 4. It's been so bad. And Katniss knowing that from being on the victory tour, District 4 was one of the ones that she said the crowd had barely concealed rage. The specific ones that Katniss mentioned was, I talked about this last episode too, I think, but in others, particularly 8, 4, and 3, there is genuine elation in the faces of the people at the sight of us, and under the elation, fury. When they chant my name, it's more of a cry for vengeance than a cheer. When the peacekeepers move in to quiet an unruly crowd, it presses back instead of retreating. And those same districts are mentioned here again. Katniss begins to just casually ask her prep team what other hardships they've been facing this winter, and Katniss says that they're not used to want, so any little disruption in supply makes an impact on them. By the time I'm ready to be dressed, there are complaints about the difficulty of getting different products, from crab meat to music chips to ribbons, have given me a sense of which districts might actually be rebelling. Seafood from District 4, electronic gadgets from District 3, and of course, fabric from District 8. The thought of such widespread rebellion has me quivering with fear and excitement. And then when Haymitch suggests that him and Katniss take a walk into town, he tells her about these rumors that District 7 and District 11 have also at least attempted to revolt. District 7 and District 11 are both part of the rebel plan to break out the victors in the Quarter Quell. Joanna Mason, who's from District 7, ends up being in Katniss's alliance in the games, and she's also the one to cut Katniss's tracker out. So at this point, Katniss is suspecting that almost half of the districts have at least attempted to revolt. District 3, 4, 7, 8, obviously, and District 11. And those are all districts that we know characters from. Katniss asks Haymitch when they're walking into town that, do you still think it won't work here? That District 12, like, we're not ready to also try to revolt. And Haymitch tells her that no, not yet, because the other districts, they're much larger. Even if half the people cower in their homes, the rebels stand a chance. Here in 12, it's got to be all of us or nothing, he says. With the announcement of the Quell, it ends up having the opposite effect of what Snow and the Capitol were wanting. The Quarter Quell ends up looking just kind of like a last-ditch Hail Mary for the Capitol to exert some kind of power in a last-ditch effort to crush the districts before everything boils over into a civil war, which will happen when Katniss blows up the arena at the end of this book. Then that's when the war officially starts. With the third Quarter Quell just happening to have the victors go back in the arena when the victors are supposed to be out of the reaping for life. That's like Joanna says in the movie, the deal is if I win the Hunger Games, I get to live the rest of my life in peace. This isn't supposed to be legal. They're not supposed to be going back in the games. And so Katniss thinks that it's just a little too perfect of a solution for what's going on with the districts revolting, with Katniss causing so many issues, with this Quell subduing the districts and killing Katniss off, all in one neat little package, she says. If you're watching this, I tried to wear the jacket for a little bit, but I'm in Texas. It's way too hot. I did put on 2 of my Hunger Games friendship bracelets I've made, though. So when Snow is announcing the twist for the 75th Hunger Games, he says that as a reminder to the rebels that even the strongest among them can't overcome the power of the Capitol. Katniss thinks that, yes, victors are our strongest. They're the ones who survived the arena and slipped the noose of poverty that strangled the rest of us. They, or should I say we, are the very embodiment of hope, or there is no hope. And now 23 of us will be killed to show how even that hope was an illusion. So Snow is not only signing the death warrants for 23 victors, but he's also trying to break them and break their spirits as well. Because even the victors that aren't reaped, that aren't going back in the games, they're going to have to watch their friends die. They're going to have to watch their friends kill their other friends. And even if they don't die, they're going to have to watch them suffer in the arena. Or they're going to be acting as mentor to potentially one of their friends, at least one of their acquaintances. And they're going to have to help the person they're mentoring kill potentially one of their other friends, one of their fellow victors. And like Katniss says, it's also showing all the citizens of Panem that even the hope that we let you have is an illusion. These victors, some of them have been around for decades. And Katniss says that she knows these victors because they've been on television, because they're guests at every Hunger Games. So these people have been in the same circles, even if they're not like best friends, they're still at least allies or acquaintances. And Katniss says that even if they're not mentoring like Haymitch always has to, most return to the capital each year for the event. I think a lot of them are friends. I'm sure some of them are returning because they have to, like Finnick, for example, or Snow's just making them come out. But I wonder if some of it is also them wanting to go to the capital each year for the games because they're getting to meet up with their fellow victors. I mean, there's a very small group of people that understand what it's like being in the games. And so they would kind of be getting a support system in some ways. Katniss tries on multiple different wedding dresses in this set of chapters, but there's one in particular that gets brought up a couple times. The wedding dress I'm talking about is the one Katniss describes as heavy white silk and sleeves that fall from my wrists to the floor and pearls. This is the dress that she ends up wearing for her interview with Caesar Flickerman that turns into the Mockingjay dress. And it's also the only one that Katniss describes as having pearls on it. Who do we associate with pearls? Peeta. Even before he gives Katniss the pearl in the arena in this book, last book, Effie compared both Peeta and Katniss to pearls because, if you put enough pressure onto coal, it turns to pearls. And Peeta will call back to that line when he gives Katniss the pearl. Katniss also mentions when she's doing her bridal shoot that she feels like dough being kneaded and reshaped again and again. And who's the first person that we think of when it comes to bread and dough? Someone whose name is literally a type of bread? Peeta Mellark. Katniss also has a nightmare with this specific wedding gown. In my nightmare, I'm dressed in the silk bridal gown, but it's torn and muddy. The long sleeves keep getting caught on thorns and branches as I run through the woods. The pack of mutation tributes draw closer and closer until it overcomes me with a hot breath and dripping fangs, and I scream myself awake. We know Katniss has nightmares, but we as readers don't always get to see exactly what Katniss's nightmare is all the time. But the mutations are a recurring one that we do see. We know she had one right after Gale's whipping about Clove and her mutt form. But we're seeing another nightmare of Katniss's that's not only about the games, but also the wedding dress, which is a symbol of Snow's control. And at the end of this chapter, after her bridal shoot, Snow is showing his control again by announcing that the victors are the ones going to be reaped, because there's no way, I guess it could be possible, but what are the odds that that was written 75 years ago? And by that, Katniss is going back into her place of nightmares. A couple random things with Katniss in this set of chapters. Katniss thinks, before the Quell announcement, the air's warm with hopeful hints of spring in it. Spring would be a good time for an uprising, I think. Well, Katniss's favorite type of day is early spring, the woods awakening after a long winter. It's just funny that Katniss just thinks so nonchalantly, like, yeah, I think spring would be a good time to start an uprising to overthrow the capital. I think spring's a good time for it. And she says that everyone feels less vulnerable once winter passes. So in other words, once snow passes. Also a mention of Katniss and fire in the set of chapters. When she's drinking with Haymitch, she says, but inside me, the liquor feels like fire, and I like it. When the Quell is announced, Katniss's reaction is just shock and panic. During moments like this, she goes into a fight, flight, or freeze response. Back in Hunger Games, when Prim's name was drawn, she had a moment of shock. It took her a second to register that Prim was being reaped. Like, she had the air knocked out of her, and she almost, fell over. It took her seeing Prim's untucked shirt to pull her out of it. And it's the same thing when Katniss sees Prim in the Capitol during Mockingjay right before the bombs go off. She freezes, she goes limp for a second, and then she reacts. Here with the Quarter Quell announcement, we see another moment of Katniss going into shock and then not understanding at first that the worst possible thing is happening, and then going into that fight, flight, or freeze. For the announcement of the Quell, she freezes and then she flees. For seeing Prim both times at the reaping last book and then right before the bombs in Mockingjay, she freezes but then goes into a fight response because she's trying to get to her sister. In this moment, what can she do? She can't fight. There's nothing to fight. so she flees. When Snow announces that the victors are going to be the ones reaped for the Quell, Katniss says, "My mother gives a faint shriek and Prim buries her face in her hands, but I feel more like the people I see in the crowd on television. Slightly baffled. What does it mean? Existing pool of victors. Then I get it, what it means. At least for me. District 12 only has 3 existing victors to choose from. 2 male, 1 female. I'm going back in the arena." And then my body reacts before my mind does, and I'm running out the door, across the lawns of the victor's village, and into the dark beyond. She essentially has a panic attack here. She's trying to keep it in until she can get somewhere to just let it out, before she just really gives into the panic. Moisture from the sodden ground soaks my socks, and I'm aware of the sharp bite of wind, but I don't stop. Where? Where to go? The woods, of course. I'm at the fence before the hum makes me remember how very trapped I am. I back away, panting, turn on my heel, and take off again. The next thing I know, I'm on my hands and knees in the cellar of one of the empty houses in Victor's village. Faint shafts of moonlight come in through the window wells above my head. I'm cold and wet and winded, but my escape attempt has done nothing to subdue the hysteria rising up inside me. It will drown me unless it's released. I ball up the front of my shirt, stuff it in my mouth, and begin to scream. How long this continues, I don't know, but when I stop, my voice is almost gone. I curl up on my side and stare at the patches of moonlight on the cement floor. Back in the arena. Back in the place of nightmares. That's where I'm going. I saw a multitude of other things. Being publicly humiliated, tortured, and executed. Fleeing through the wilderness, pursued by peacekeepers and hovercraft, which is what she saw happen to Lavinia and the boy that she was with in the woods. Marriage to Peeta with her children forced into the arena, which is one of Katniss's biggest fears. It's why she doesn't want to get married, because she associates marriage with children, and her biggest fear is her children or someone she loves being in the games. That's the main reason that she doesn't want to have kids. But never that I myself would have to be a player in the games again. Why? Because there's no precedent for it. Victors are out of the reaping for life. That's the deal if you win. Until now. And she says that she hears someone calling her name, but she just ignores it but at the moment, I excuse myself from thinking about even those I love most. I think of only me and what lies ahead. I think a lot of times it's easy for people to forget that Katniss she's still 16 at this point. They're in April, so she hasn't even turned 17 yet. But either way, she's still a child. And even if she wasn't a child, I think anybody would deserve a moment like this just to sit with what this means. She was so much in the fight or flight, panic attack state. She doesn't even remember how she got down to the cellar of the empty Victor's village house. Or punching a window. When she gets up to go to Haymitch's, she says, "I stumble around the cellar looking for an exit. How did I even get into this place? I feel my way up the steps to the kitchen and see the glass window in the door that has been shattered. It must be why my hand seems to be bleeding." And it's not until after she wakes up after being passed out that she says, "My hands sting, and that's when I notice the stitches, small and even, across one palm and up the side of the other hand. Vaguely, I remember breaking the glass window last night." Katniss has been the one taking care of her family since she was 11 after her father died, and her mother went into the deep depression and the catatonic state. She's always been the strong one, the one trying to be strong for everybody else in her family. Even when her life was in jeopardy in the games, she was trying to be strong and not show how much she was hurting in the arena for Prim's sake, because she knew Prim was watching her and she tried to be strong for her. And Katniss is just not used to people taking care of her. She's trying to let her mother back in somewhat and trying to allow her mother to do small things for her to take care of her after coming back from the games. But for so long, at the beginning, her mom just wasn't there mentally. She wasn't present mentally. And then after Astrid came out of that, Katniss had already built up those walls and pushed her away. One of Katniss's main points of trauma and main fears is fear of abandonment. It's one of the reasons she tries to push Peeta away. It's why she didn't want to let her mother back in, because her mother hurt her. She abandoned her. Yes, she was still there physically, but not mentally. I mean, everything got put on Katniss' shoulders. And Katniss, at this point, she's just not used to people taking care of her. It takes a conscious effort on Katniss's part to allow her mother to do things for her. Katniss has said there's no going back with her and her mother's relationship with those years of Katniss pushing her away and the abandonment. Katniss is always going to try to protect her mother and Prim. She's always going to try to shoulder everything. And after the announcement of the Quell, after everything that she's gone through, all the things she's shouldering, and now the knowledge that she's going back in the games, and as far as she's concerned, she's dying in the arena. She tries to, once again, just shoulder all that alone, but she has this moment where she just breaks down. She says, "The footsteps on the stairs renew my panic from last night. I'm not ready to see my mother and Prim. I have to pull myself together to be calm and reassuring, the way I was when we said our goodbyes the day of the last reaping. I have to be strong. I struggle into an upright position, push my wet hair off my throbbing temples, and brace myself for this meeting. They appear in the doorway, holding tea and toast, their faces filled with concern. I open my mouth, planning to start off with some kind of joke, and burst into tears. So much for being strong. She is strong. Katniss is very strong, but Katniss views her breaking down in this moment as weakness instead of just her being human. She didn't let herself cry at last year's reaping because she knew the others would mark her tears as weakness. And in some situations, like, a fight to the death, like the Hunger Games are, where getting upset at the reaping that could be viewed as a weakness. That can be true, but Katniss breaking down here, that is not a moment of weakness that Katniss thinks it is. My mother sits on the side of the bed and Prim crawls right up next to me and they hold me, making quiet, soothing sounds until I mostly cried out. Then Prim gets a towel and dries my hair, combing out the knots, while my mother coaxes tea and toast into me. They dress me in warm pajamas and layer more blankets on me and I drift off again. Because Katniss has a tendency to just push things down or react out of anger instead of hurt because it's safer than being upset, it can be easy to forget, like I said, that she is a scared, traumatized 16-year-old girl. And in this brief moment that Katniss views as a weakness, we get a glimpse of that. We get to see her as the scared, traumatized, weight of the world on her shoulders 16-year-old girl that she is. And that doesn't make her weak like she thinks it does. It just makes her human. You can see the difference in Katniss from last year to now because Katniss, while she doesn't want to break down in front of her mother and Prim, she does let her mom and Prim take care of her, and that's difficult for her to do. This time last year, she probably would have just pushed away. She would have been like, nope, Prim, everything's fine, and then just pushed her mother away out of anger. But the games have changed her in more ways than one. When she wakes up again that afternoon, she feels embarrassed by her display of emotion. She says, before I go down, I pause at the top of the stairs, feeling slightly embarrassed about the way I've handled the news of the quarter quell. My erratic flight, drinking with Haymitch, weeping. Given the circumstances, I guess I deserve one day of indulgence. I'm glad the cameras weren't here for it, though. Katniss, you do deserve a day of indulgence, okay? Aside from that moment of Astrid helping take care of Katniss, there's a couple other little moments that we get of that, too, in the set of chapters. When Katniss is in the middle of her bridal shoot, she says, my mother manages to feed me bits of food and sips of tea while they work on me, but by the time the shoot's over, I'm starving and exhausted. And then after Katniss wakes up, before Astrid and Prim come up the stairs, and she goes and vomits in the bathroom because she's drank too much. Been there. She says, I turn on the shower and stand under the warm rain for a minute before I realize I'm still in my underclothes. My mother must have stripped off my filthy outer ones and tucked me into bed. And we're also seeing Prim take care of Katniss too. We're also starting to see Prim being forced to grow up too fast, like Katniss was, and how the games have changed Prim. When Katniss goes downstairs after waking up again, she says, downstairs, my mother and Prim embrace me again, but they're not overly emotional. I know they're holding things in to make it easier on me, which is exactly what Katniss did last year. Looking at Prim's face, it's hard to imagine she's the same frail little girl I left behind on reaping day 9 months ago. The combination of that ordeal and all that has followed, the cruelty in the district, the parade of sick and wounded that she often treats by herself now, my mother's hands are too full. These things have aged her years. She's grown quite a bit too. We're practically the same height now. But that isn't what makes her seem so much older. And we'll see more of that in Mockingjay. Katniss says that she's really gone then. The little girl with the back of her shirt sticking out like a ducktail. The one who needed help reaching the dishes. And who begged me to see the frosted cakes in the bakery window. Time and tragedy have forced her to grow too quickly, at least for my taste, into a young woman who stitches bleeding wounds and knows her mother can only hear so much. But we do also get a moment of Prim being a 12-year-old, because she's also still 12 at this point, because her birthday is also in May like Katniss's. And I say we're in April because Katniss says she left Prim behind 9 months ago on Reaping Day, and Reaping is July 4th, so if I did my math correctly, I think it's April. Prim gets excited about getting to see Katniss's wedding dresses. She had made Katniss promise in the last set of chapters that, don't try them on until I'm back, which Katniss just never ends up trying them on. But she says, Prim, who came home from school in time to see the last 2 dresses, chatters on about them with my mother. They both seem overly happy about the photo shoot. When I fall into bed, I realize it's because they think it means I'm safe, that the Capitol has overlooked my interference with a whipping since no one is going to go to such trouble and expense for someone they plan on killing anyway. Right. I'm sure Prim is actually excited about getting to see the last 2 wedding dresses, but like Katniss says, it's mainly because Prim thinks this means Katniss is safe. There's also this moment with Prim that she just seems like a little sister. Prim comes home from school bubbling over with excitement. The teacher announced there was mandatory programming tonight. I think it's going to be your photo shoot. It can't be, Prim. They only did the pictures yesterday, I tell her. Well, that's what somebody heard, she says. Prim may have not said it like that, but that's how I picture, like, that's how middle school is shocked. Well, that's what somebody heard. Prim, she may have been like, well, that's what somebody heard, because Prim is sweet. But Katniss realizing that her mother and Prim are happy with the photo shoot because they think it means she's safe, and Katniss being like, yeah, right, that means I'm safe, totally. She is right to be doubtful, because at the end of this chapter, she realizes that she's going back in the games. Speaking of the Quell in the games, the box that the boy carries that hold the Quell envelopes is a simple wooden box, and a plain wooden box is the coffin that the tributes are sent home in after being killed in the games. And speaking of a tribute being killed in the games, Maisie Donner, like I said, we get the first mention of Maisie here in this set of chapters. Astrid says, I had a friend who went that year, says my mother quietly. Maisie Donner. Her parents own the sweet shop. They gave me her songbird after, a canary. Canaries are used in the coal mines to detect toxic gases and to alert the miners, and Katniss will even talk about this later, about how the miners use canaries in the coal mines. I usually cover symbolism later, but I wanted to talk about the canary right here. A canary can represent early warnings, freedom, hope, joy, and creative inspiration. I annotated all this before Sunrise on the Reaping, so none of this has Sunrise on the Reaping annotations to it. But usually when I'm doing this symbolisms and stuff, I've already done it in here, but I go back and I relook it up because I want the source. Sometimes I wrote it like word for word because I'm like, oh, it's just me, like I don't need to cite it, and I don't want to accidentally say word for word someone else's thing without citing it. But I didn't write in here, because this was before Sunrise, about a canary representing creative inspiration. When I saw that, that made me think of Maisie from what we know on Sunrise on the Reaping. The creative inspiration made me think of Maisie because Maisie made tokens for the other tributes with what she had available to her. A caged canary can also represent being silenced, and the canary used to belong to Maisie, and she was a caged canary that was silenced by being a tribute in the arena and being killed. There's the saying a canary in a coal mine, and that saying just means it's an early warning sign of danger or failure. I had wrote in my annotated copy when I was originally doing this, because we did know Maisie a little bit from what Katniss and Peeta watched during Haymitch's games, but we get a lot more of like Maisie's character and who she is in Sunrise on the Reaping. I had wrote in my copy here, I can't find where I found this at. When I looked it up again, I didn't see it, but I had wrote in here, I saw it at some point apparently, because I wrote that a canary can represent freedom, innocence, and the fragile nature of life. In some traditions, they can be seen as guides that departed to the afterlife. I don't know if I meant to write they can be seen as guides that guide the departed to the afterlife, or that they can be seen as guides to the departed to the afterlife. I don't know, it's kind of the same thing. But I couldn't find where I had found that to write in here, but it was somewhere, so I wanted to include it. Like I mentioned at the top of this episode, for the Sunrise on the Reaping spoiler warning, especially for this episode, because we're going to start really getting some Sunrise on the Reaping callbacks now, going forward, especially next set of chapters. We learn just a little bit of information about what happened after Sunrise on the Reaping that didn't have to do with Haymitch. Like I mentioned about the canary, after Maisie died, Maisie's parents gave Astrid Maisley's songbird. This doesn't really have to do with Sunrise on the Reaping, aside from it being about Haymitch, but Katniss says that he didn't get too excited over my District 13 story. Do we think that Haymitch knew about District 13 at this point? We know he knows about it by the end of Catching Fire, but what's the consensus with everybody? Do we think that Haymitch knew here about District 13? Maybe he just knew some rumors? Because this is what his and Katniss's conversation about it is. So you think 13 was really destroyed? I mean, Bonnie and Twill were right about the footage of the Mockingjay, I say. Okay, but what does that prove? Nothing, really. There are plenty of reasons they could be using old footage. Probably it looks more impressive. And it's a lot simpler, isn't it? To just press a few buttons in the editing room than to fly all the way out there and film it, he says. The idea that 13 has somehow rebounded and the Capitol is ignoring it, that sounds like the kind of rumors desperate people cling to. I know, I was just hoping, I say. Exactly, because you're desperate, says Haymitch. Did you notice how he didn't say that he 100% believes it's destroyed? He just said that it sounded like a rumor that desperate people cling to. Haymitch has definitely been a desperate person in his life. So if Haymitch doesn't know about District 13 at this point, he could also be hanging on to the hope that maybe District 13 does exist. But he's not going to let Katniss know that. Or he already knows about District 13. We don't 100% know when Haymitch learns about it. I kind of think Haymitch does know about District 13 at this point. We don't know that from Sunrise on the Reaping, and we don't really ever get confirmation of when he found out. We just know that Haymitch knows about the plan to break them out of the arena. I think it's very possible that he does know already about District 13. He may not know, like, 100% what it's like there. I think he definitely does know about it, though, at this point. I mean, you could say he doesn't, and then he learns about it after the Quell is announced. But it's been 25 years at this point since he won his games, and he was trying to blow up the arena in the 50th Hunger Games. He's been in some way, part of the rebellion for 25 years now. He knows about the Underground. He knows about Plutarch. He's not flat out saying that District 13 does not exist, you're crazy, Katniss. He's saying it's the kind of rumor that desperate people cling to, and Katniss is desperate. And we know that Katniss can't really act. This was before the Quell, before they knew they were going back in. The reason they don't tell Katniss Peeta about the rebels' plan to break them out of the arena is because they don't want to risk them acting differently, or if they got captured, to have that information and be tortured for it. So Haymitch could definitely just keep this from Katniss. Moving to Katniss, Haymitch, and Peeta. After the Quell announcement, Katniss says that, whereas the only friend I'll have to worry about killing will either be Peeta or Haymitch. Peeta or Haymitch? I sit straight up, throwing off the sheeting. What just went through my mind? There's no situation in which I would ever kill Peeta or Haymitch, but one of them will be in the arena with me, and that's a fact. They may have even decided between them who it will be. Whoever's picked first, the other one will have the option of volunteering to take his place. I already know what will happen. Peeta will ask Haymitch to let him go into the arena with me, no matter what, for my sake, to protect me. And she's right, that's exactly what Peeta made Haymitch promise, and what he ends up doing. He volunteers for Haymitch to go back in to help protect Katniss. Katniss also says there that there's no situation in which she would ever kill Haymitch or Peeta. And in Mockingjay, Katniss says that she's willing to kill Peeta, even though she's not. But at the end of Catching Fire, when she wakes up on the hovercraft and she thinks that they've all been taken by the Capitol, she does actually actively try to go kill Peeta, because she's trying to spare him from the torture that she thinks they're heading into for the Capitol. She wants to save him from that. So there is a situation, I think, in which she would kill Peeta or Haymitch, and that's the situation about them being captured by the Capitol. Even though she couldn't do it with Gale, I think that to save them, she would do it. This next part, I tried originally to break up into different sections, but there's just so much I want to talk about with the scene. I'm just going to go beat by beat through the entire scene. This whole sequence with Katniss going to see Haymitch after the Quell announcement hits differently now after reading Sunrise on the Reaping. We knew from just the original series that Haymitch won the 50th Hunger Games, that he watched Maisie die. I mean, in this book, we get to see a version of his games. And we know from the original series that he lost his family, he lost his girl after he was crowned victor. But like I said, we get so much more backstory with Sunrise on the Reaping and what happened. It hits different. It hits so much harder now. When Katniss walks in, she says, he's sitting alone at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of white liquor in one fist, his knife in the other. Drunk as a skunk. Oh, there she is, all tuckered out. Finally did the math. Did you, sweetheart? Worked out you won't be going in alone, and now you're here to ask me what, he says. There is a 50-50 shot that Haymitch is going back in these games, and there's a 100% shot that someone he cares about is going back into the games. Katniss is definitely going back in, and possibly Peeta. The last Quell, he was a tribute, and Luella was supposed to go into the arena with Haymitch, the one that Katniss reminds him so much of. And now there's a possibility that Haymitch is going in with Katniss. And if not, Katniss or Peeta are going in, and he cares about them both. Luella was his first ally, and I know we're not in Sunrise yet, but I want to put this in here because he's also talking about the sweetheart nickname. Haymitch says in Sunrise, "So, are you going to be my ally or what, sweetheart?" She actually smiles. It's an old joke. When she was 5 and I was 8, she decided she was my sweetheart and trailed after me, telling anyone who'd listen. It lasted about a week, then she transferred her affections to a boy named Buster, who gave her a bullfrog. I think her heart would have moved on anyway, as you're probably not too stuck on someone you have burping contest with. But we're still good buddies. If I had a little sister her age, I'd want her to be just like Luella. And I've harbored the hope that she'd wait for Sid to grow up before settling on a real sweetheart. Now, of course, her chances of growing up are nil. She's frozen forever at 13. I'll be your ally, she says. You and me, we can trust each other. Oh, can we just imagine for a second Haymitch going back into the arena with Katniss, Haymitch volunteering for Peeta to go back into the arena? And I say that because in Sunrise, he says, still talking to Luella, looking after her will give me a reason to keep going. Her looking after me will stave off the terror of facing death alone. I can only hope we leave the world together. Doing all right, sweetheart, I ask. I've been better, she responds. We'll just stick together, okay? Okay. Back to the scene in Catching Fire. Haymitch had said, you're here to ask me what? And Katniss says, I don't answer. The window's wide open and the wind cuts through me just as if I were outside. I'll admit it was easier for the boy. He was here before I could snap the seal on a bottle, begging me for another chance to go in. But what can you say? He mimics my voice. Take his place, Haymitch, because all things being equal, I'd rather Peeta had a crack at the rest of his life than you. I bite my lip, because once he said it, I'm afraid that's what I do want, for Peeta to live, even if it means Haymitch's death. No, I don't. He's dreadful, of course, but Haymitch is my family now. Katniss calling Haymitch dreadful, but family, and the way that Haymitch just mimics her, they're so alike, and they are each other's family. And also, there's Katniss's lip biting habit again. She thinks, what did I come for, I think? What could I possibly want here? I came for a drink, I say. Haymitch bursts out laughing and slams the bottle on the table before me. I rub my sleeve across the top and take a couple gulps before I come up choking. It takes a few minutes to compose myself, and even then my eyes and nose are still streaming. But inside me, the liquor feels like fire, and I like it. The tiny detail of Katniss rubbing the top of the bottle because Haymitch had been drinking out of it to, clean it off, it's kind of funny. And Katniss is dealing with the news of the Court of Quell the same way that Haymitch is. She's getting drunk. And I wonder now, after reading Sunrise, if part of the reason that Haymitch laughed at her there was because he's seeing himself in her. It may partly be at him actually laughing, and the other part may be just he's laughing because of how alike they are and how sad it is. Before Haymitch's games in Sunrise, he said that he wasn't much of a drinker himself. And in the Hunger Games, before Katniss goes into the arena, Katniss didn't like how alcohol made her feel, and she was like, how can Haymitch walk around like this all the time? But just like Haymitch, after the games, they've changed in that regard. I mean, obviously Katniss hasn't become an alcoholic like Haymitch is, but Haymitch has had more time and different circumstances, but she is actively wanting to drink. Maybe it should be you, I say matter-of-factly as I pull up a chair. You hate life anyway. Very true, says Haymitch. And since last time I tried to keep you alive, seems like I'm obligated to say the boy this time. That's another good point, I say, wiping my nose and tipping up the bottle again. Haymitch being so nonchalant about just hating life, it hurts. I mean, it hurt to begin with, but also with the knowledge of Sunrise on the Reaping. And Katniss is planning on dying no matter who goes in with her, because she knows that was probably not written 75 years ago. Snow wants her dead, and this is how he's going to do it. If it had ended up being Katniss and Haymitch going in, Katniss would have tried to keep Haymitch alive. I mean, like she said, Haymitch is her family. And Haymitch, he now has two people that he cares about that at least one of them is 100% going back into the arena. Katniss and Peeta are the first ones that he's really let in since losing everything after his games. And now he has both of them coming to him to say, help me save the other one. Essentially help me die in the arena to save the other. Peeta's argument is that since I chose you, I now owe him anything he wants. And what he wants is the chance to go in to protect you, says Haymitch. I knew it. In this way, Peeta's not hard to predict. While I was wallowing around on the floor of that cellar, thinking only of myself, he was here, thinking only of me. Shame isn't a strong enough word for what I feel. You could live 100 lifetimes and not deserve him, Haymitch says. Yeah, I say brusquely. No question he's the superior one in this trio. So what are you going to do? Haymitch telling Katniss that she could live 100 lifetimes and never deserve Peeta. Haymitch is pretty much just voicing what Katniss has always thought, that she doesn't deserve Peeta. I think Haymitch is also projecting his own feelings onto Katniss about not being worthy. Katniss agreeing that Peeta's the superior one of their trio is somewhat called back to by Finnick and by Katniss's thoughts later on in Catching Fire. When they're in the arena, Finnick says, and no one in this arena was victor by chance. He eyes Peeta for a moment, except maybe Peeta. Finnick knows then what Haymitch and I know about Peeta, being truly, deep down, better than the rest of us. Finnick took out that tribute from 5 without blinking an eye. And how long did I take to turn deadly? I shot to kill when I targeted Enobaria and Gloss and Brutus. Peeta would have at least attempted negotiations first, seeing if some wider alliance was possible. But to what end? Finnick's right. I'm right. People in this arena weren't crowned for their compassion. But back to the scene at hand. I don't know, Haymitch sighs. Go back in with you, maybe, if I can. My name's drawn at the Reaping. It won't matter. He'll just volunteer to take my place. We sit for a while in silence. It would be bad for you in the arena, wouldn't it? Knowing all the others, I ask. Oh, I think we can count on it being unbearable wherever I am. I want to cry. He cares about Katniss and Peeta so much, and there is a chance that he's going to lose them both. And if Haymitch does go back in, he's going back into his place of nightmares. And he's once again going to have to face a field of his friends. But now he's known them much longer. And no matter what, no matter if he goes in or not, he's going to have to watch some of his friends die. Like Chaff, for example. And not only people that were just his friends, but people that were his former mentors, like Wyrus and Mags. He nods at the bottle. Can I have that back now? No, I say, wrapping my arms around it. Haymitch pulls another bottle out from under the table and gives the top a twist. That's a little bit of sad humor there, because Katniss is wrapping her arms around the bottle and just immediately refuses to give it back to Haymitch, like, no, this is mine, you can't have it back, no. And then Haymitch is just like, whatever, oh well, and then immediately pulls a full one out from underneath the table. But I realize I'm not just here for a drink. There's something else I want from Haymitch. Okay, I figured out what I'm asking, I say. If it is Peeta and me in the games, this time we try to keep him alive. Something flickers across his bloodshot eyes. Pain. Like I said before, Katniss is asking Haymitch to let her die. And even without the context of Sunrise on the Reaping, and even without the context of Katniss reminding him of Luella and Katniss being Burdock's daughter, he does love Katniss, and he loves Peeta. And he's potentially going to lose both of them. And on top of that, like I said, they're both coming to him saying, Haymitch, help me save the other one at the cost of my own life. And if Katniss and Peeta both end up going back in, which they do, without the rebel plan and everything, if this had just been only one's coming out, if it had been Katniss or Peeta to survive the Quell, they would not have come back. Not really. Because Katniss says, even at the end of the game's last book, that if Peeta dies, she'll never go home. Not really. She'll always be trapped in the arena, trying to think her way out. And Haymitch knows exactly what it's like to lose the person that you love. And he knows how that changes you. And he knows how broken Katniss would be, or how broken Peeta would be if one came back without the other. And again, not taking into account the rebel plan. If Haymitch had gone into the arena with Katniss, and he was able to somehow make sure that she got home, somehow make sure she was able to be crowned victor again, even without, just the dangers of a regular arena, on top of it being a quarter Quell and the president having a target on her back, that would be at the cost of his own death, which, it's not like Haymitch really values his own life, but he would also kind of be breaking his promise to Lenore Dove, because he would never get to see a sunrise on a world without a reaping. And then Katniss tells him, like you said, it's going to be bad no matter how you slice it. And whatever Peeta wants, it's his turn to be saved. We both owe him that. My voice takes on a pleading tone. Besides, the Capitol hates me so much I'm as good as dead now. He still might have a chance. Please, Haymitch, say you'll help me. And Peeta isn't the one that's saved. He is captured by the Capitol. Once again, Katniss was chosen over Peeta, even if she doesn't want that, just like last year's games. I've been talking a lot about Haymitch, but let's switch to Katniss here real quick. Because she does love Peeta. And she may not know in what way, but she wants him to have a chance at life, even at the expense of her own. She wants him to have a future. And she'll even think about that in the arena, about imagining a world where Peeta's children are safe. And she knows that she is hurting Haymitch by asking him to let her die, but keeping Peeta alive is her priority. He frowns at the bottle, weighing my words. All right, he says finally. Thanks, I say. I should go see Peeta now, but I don't want to. My head's spinning from drink, and I'm so wiped out. Who knows what he could get me to agree to. No, I have to go home to face my mother and Prim. Remember, Haymitch has also made promises to Peeta at this point. In the Quarter Quell on the beach, Peeta tells Katniss, I don't know what kind of deals you think you made with Haymitch, but you should know he made me promises as well. Of course, I know this too. He told Peeta they could keep me alive so that he wouldn't be suspicious. So I think we can assume he was lying to one of us. This gets my attention. A double deal. A double promise, with only Haymitch knowing which one is real. And I think it's pretty obvious by what Katniss means by why she didn't want to go over to Peeta's, because who knows what he could get her to agree to. She's obviously talking about Peeta getting her to agree to letting him go back in with her, or letting him save her kind of thing. Not in like a weird nefarious way that some people like to hate on Peeta, and I'm just putting that out there. That is not what is being said here. I just wanted to clarify that is not what she's talking about. She's talking about Peeta, while she's drunk, getting her to agree to letting him go back in with her to save her. The next day after this whole conversation, when Katniss goes back over to Haymitch's house, Peeta has just tossed out all of Haymitch's liquor, and he prevents Ripper from selling any more liquor to Katniss or Haymitch. And that pisses both Katniss and Haymitch off. Haymitch takes a swing with his knife, but Peeta deflects it so easily it's pathetic. A couple things about that. Peeta is now a victor. He has survived the games now. So him dodging Haymitch's knife is a little bit of a show don't tell of Peeta's combat skills, and just as, him having survived the games and trained for the games, And even before the arena, remember, Peta was a wrestler. He was a very good wrestler. And when he was training for the 74th Games, he excelled in hand-to-hand combat. This moment also parallels with Peta and Haymitch on the train to their first games. On the train, "That's very funny," says Peta. Suddenly, he lashes out at the glass at Haymitch's hand. It shatters on the floor, sending the blood-red liquid toward the back of the train. Only not to us. Haymitch considers this a moment, then punches Peta in the jaw, knocking him from his chair. Only that time, Haymitch actually made contact with Peta. Like I said, that was showing, Peta being a victor too. He can dodge someone swinging a knife at him. It could, show that on Peta's side, but it also could just show, like, Haymitch was being half-hearted with him with swinging the knife at Peta. Katniss notes later on, when they're acting like careers, training like careers, that Haymitch isn't very steady with the knife anymore. So it could also just be that too, or a mixture of all three. After Haymitch swings at Peta with a knife, anger rises up in me. What business is it of yours what he does? It's completely my business. However it falls out, 2 of us are going back into the arena again, with the other one as mentor. We can't afford any drunkards on this team. Especially not you, Katniss, says Peta to me. What? I sputter indignantly. It would be more convincing if I weren't still so hungover. Last night's the only time I've ever been drunk. Yeah, and look at the shape you're in, says Peta. Peta is trying to protect Katniss, but Katniss is right when she calls Peta self-righteous, because honestly, if Haymitch and Katniss want to spend the next 3 months on a bender, that is their choice. But I also get that Peta, he's trying to protect Katniss and Haymitch too. But Peta also doesn't want Katniss going down the same path as Haymitch did. He doesn't want her becoming a drunkard, especially since she is guaranteed to go back into the game. So I do agree with Peta on that. Like, he's right, like, don't go down this path, and you need to be, ready for the arena. But Katniss is right also, in my opinion. That was the only time she's ever been drunk, and it was very extenuating circumstances. Yes, like, represented by Haymitch here, it can be a very slippery slope. Would Katniss have continued drinking if Peta hadn't just flat out prevented it? Maybe. I don't think so. I personally just don't think so. I don't think she would have been at the point that Haymitch was, but she could have. And I would be pissed off too if someone called me a drunkard and I'd only been drunk one time and it was because something horrible had happened and I'd wanted to drown my sorrows for one night. Like, so I do get that. I 100% understand where Katniss is coming from, and her being like, it'd probably be a little more convincing if I wasn't still hungover. I don't know what I expected from my first meeting with Peta after the announcement. A few hugs and kisses, a little comfort maybe. Not this. I turned to Haymitch. Don't worry, I'll get you more liquor. Is Katniss enabling Haymitch's drinking habit? Yes. But she also understands why she's drinking, and she has seen him, and Peta too, has seen him go through withdrawals. I mean, her and Peta even stockpiled liquor before this, chapters ago, to make sure he had some kind of supply if he couldn't get alcohol again because of how bad his withdrawals were. That's also just a little moment of Haymitch and Katniss's relationship and Kiss's defiant personality. Because she's like, Peta says I can't drink, fine. Haymitch, I'll get you more liquor anyway. Don't worry, I'll get it for you. Peta responds, then I'll turn you both in, let you sober up in the stock, says Peta. What's the point to this, asks Haymitch. The point is that 2 of us are coming home from the capital. 1 mentor and 1 victor, says Peta. Effie's sending me recordings of all the living victors. We're going to watch their games and learn everything we can about how they fight. We're going to put on weight and get strong. We're going to start acting like careers. And one of us is going to be victor again, whether you 2 like it or not. He sweeps out of the room, slamming the front door. Haymitch and I wince at the bank. I don't like self-righteous people, I say. What's to like, says Haymitch, who begins sucking the dregs out of the empty bottles. You and me. That's who he plans on coming home, I say. Well, then the joke's on him, says Haymitch. After the announcement for the Quell, Peta has a little bit of an attitude change. And it's not out of character for him, but it is different than how Katniss thought he would react. I personally think he reacts this way after the Quell announcement for a couple different reasons. He's obviously just as upset about the Quell as Haymitch and Katniss are. And I think he's channeling that into, in some ways, anger. And Katniss will later say that he kind of became a demanding trainer in this time period. So I think he's channeling that anger and his helplessness. He can't do anything to prevent Katniss going back in the arena. So I'm sure there's an element of helplessness too. And this is him saying, we're going to act like careers. This is him trying to do what he can in this horrible situation to take back some kind of control, to try to do what he can to protect Katniss and to protect Haymitch. Peta is planning on dying in the games again, and he's potentially going to watch the girl he loves die in the games. Even if she doesn't die, he's going to have to watch her, at the very least, just go through another Hunger Games. He also knows that Katniss has made some kind of deal with Haymitch because he knows Katniss, and he knows that Katniss is willing to sacrifice herself for him. And if Haymitch does go through with whatever deal is that he made with Katniss, Haymitch does end up getting to go back into the arena, he's going to potentially have to watch Haymitch die as well. We've seen instances of Peeta reacting out in anger before, like in District 11 when he lashed out at the lamp after finding out that Katniss and Haymitch kept Snow's visit from him. Or even, like I mentioned, with him knocking the drink out of Haymitch's hand on the way to the first games. He was pissed that Haymitch is not taking this seriously, so he knocked the drink out of his hand. I've also always kind of wondered, too, if Peeta is also trying to make his own death easier on Katniss. At least at this point in time, because I think if that is the case, he does drop that when they're actually on their way to the games. But at this point in time, I wonder if there's some part of him that's like trying to push Katniss away like she does to make his death hurt Katniss less. We know he plans on dying in the Quell. On the beach during the games, when Peeta gives Katniss the locket, Katniss says, "So Peeta's giving me his life and Gale at the same time. To let me know I shouldn't ever have doubts about it. Everything. That's what Peeta wants me to take from him." So I think this could be a way with way he's acting for training for the Quell, for acting like careers, is him trying to put some distance between himself and Katniss. But when they are on the train to the games, he can't do that anymore. Like, these are what he thinks are his final days, and he just drops it. The night on the train after this reaping, Katniss says, "It's the first time since they announced the Quarter Quell that he's offered me any sort of affection. He's been more like a demanding trainer, always pushing, always insisting Haymitch and I run faster, eat more, know our enemy better. Lover, forget about that. He abandoned any pretense of even being my friend." And with him trying to get them to train like careers, he's trying to help save their lives, Haymitch and Katniss's, because it takes a few days for them to agree to train like careers. In Peeta's eyes, they're not even caring about their own lives. Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch's situations before this year's games are obviously very different from their first games, because now they know they're going in. They know at least Katniss is going in, and there's a 50-50 shot that they're going in. And now, this time around, they have time to prepare. So they do that by, every night, we watch the old recaps of the games that the remaining victors won. I realize we never met any of them on the victory tour, which seems odd in retrospect. When I bring it up, Haymitch says that the last thing President Snow would have wanted was to show Peeta and me, especially me, bonding with the other victors in potentially rebellious districts. Victors have a special status, and if they appeared to be supporting my defiance at the Capitol, it would have been dangerous politically. One of the victors that she bonds with is Finnick. Katniss also says, adjusting for age, I realize some of our opponents may be elderly, which is both sad and reassuring. Mags is one of the elderly tributes that Katniss will want as an ally and take on as an ally. And Mags was Haymitch's mentor during his games. Peeta takes copious notes. Haymitch volunteers information about the victors' personalities, and slowly we begin to know our competition. In order to keep Katniss and/or Peeta alive, Haymitch is having to essentially learn how and teach Katniss Peeta how to kill his friends, or at least people that he's known for years. Like Beetee and Wyrus and Mags, for example, they'll all go back into the arena. During their training portion, they work out, stretch, and work on combat skills, throwing knives, and fighting hand-to-hand. Katniss also mentions that she even teaches them how to climb trees. Now, it's probably been a while for Haymitch. I don't see Haymitch, just casually going out and climbing trees after his games. But he did climb trees in the arena. There were a few times, actually. In Sunrise on the Reaping, when Haymitch is in the arena, he says, I'm not dizzy now, so I pick a sizable tree with a thick foliage near the butterfly bush and climb about 30 feet into the branches. I pitch my hammock between two sturdy limbs, making sure that if one side gives way, I'll have a fork to catch me. This wasn't recommended in class, but I don't feel secure enough to sleep at ground level again. He even climbs up at one point to get a better lay of the arena, and he also climbs up the tree to go to Welly. Who does that sound like? It sounds like Katniss. After all the years of abuse, Haymitch's body resists improvement. He's still remarkably strong, but the shortest run wins him. And you think a guy who sleeps every night with a knife might actually be able to hit the side of a house with one, but his hands shake so badly it takes weeks for him to achieve even that. A knife was one of Haymitch's main weapons in his arena, and for his 16th birthday, his reaping, his mom also gave him a brand new pocket knife with strict instructions that the latter's not to be used for any mumblety peg or any other knife games. Katniss says that Peeta and I excel under the new regimen, though. It gives me something to do. It gives us all something to do besides accept defeat. In Mockingjay, Katniss eventually agrees to train so that Coin will allow her to go to the Capitol. And that's also a way for her to not accept defeat and to keep her mind off Peeta as well. She says in Mockingjay, I can't very well say it's so I can carry out my own personal vendetta against Snow, or that the idea of remaining here in 13 with the latest version of Peeta while Gale goes off to fight is unbearable. but I have no shortage of reasons to want to fight the capital. Back in training for the Quell, my mother puts us on a special diet to gain weight. Prim treats our sore muscles. Madge sneaks her father's capital newspapers. Predictions on who will be victor of the victors show us among the favorites. That's another example of Astrid helping Katniss in a set of chapters, but it's also showing Astrid helping Peeta and Haymitch, which with Sunrise just gives us an extra layer with Astrid and Haymitch's relationship. And I want to point out here that Katniss mentioning Madge sneaking them her father's capital newspapers. Katniss will not get to say goodbye to Madge after the Reaping this year. She never gets to tell Madge goodbye, because these are the last times that Katniss sees Madge alive, because Madge and her family don't survive the bombing of 12. Even Gale steps into the picture on Sundays, although he's got no love for Peeta or Haymitch, and teaches us all he knows about snares. It's weird for me, being in conversation with both Peeta and Gale, but they seem to have set aside whatever issues they have about me. What is Gale's issue with Haymitch? Like, we know his beef with Peeta, okay? But what did Haymitch do? Does he have personal beef against Haymitch, or he just doesn't like Haymitch in general? Katniss is your best friend, and Haymitch is a part of Katniss's family now. Even if he wants to be that way towards Peeta, he has a reason for it. But you don't want to give Haymitch a chance. Like, yeah, he's surly and he can be an asshole, but Haymitch and Katniss are a lot alike, and Gale and Katniss are a lot alike. So maybe Haymitch just doesn't like Gale, and that's why Gale doesn't like Haymitch. Just saying. A couple little quick things about Katniss and Haymitch's relationship is Katniss says that Haymitch and I can speak in kind of a shorthand now, which I have been talking about that and pointing it out throughout this deep dive about them being able to communicate without words. And then the last thing, the next morning after the Quell announcement and Katniss is hungover, she says, my mother ladles out a mug of broth for me, and I ask for a second mug to take to Haymitch. Then I walk across the lawn to his house. He's only just waking up and accepts the mug without comment. We sit there, almost peacefully, sipping our broth and watching the sun set through the living room window. They're watching the sunset, not rise. But Katniss being like, hey, can I have one for Haymitch? And then going over there. It's just a little bitty moment we get of their relationship. Of the found family. See, I love Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch's found family dynamic. And with Prim in there too, and Astrid. But mainly Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch, and Prim. Real quickly, there's some foreshadowing for District 12's destruction at the end of this book. Haymitch tells Katniss, if things really do get out of hand, I think they have no problem killing off another district, same as they did 13. Make an example of it, you know? And District 12 is bombed to rubble at the end of this book. Katniss says in Mockingjay that more than 90% of District 12's population is dead, was killed by this bombing. And as a result, Katniss says that there's only about 800 or so survivors from District 12. Talking about Gale real quick. After Katniss returns home after the announcement, after being at Haymitch's, Gale's there, and she says, as I stagger up the steps to my house, the front door opens, and Gale pulls me into his arms. I was wrong. We should have just gone when you said, he whispers. No, I say. I'm having trouble focusing, and the liquor keeps sloshing out of my bottle and down the back of Gale's jacket, but he doesn't seem to care. It's not too late, he says. Over his shoulder, I see my mother and Prim clutching each other in the doorway. We run, they die, and now I've got Peeta to protect. End of discussion. Yeah, it is. My knees give away, and he's holding me up. As the alcohol overcomes my mind, I hear the glass bottle shatter onto the floor. This seems appropriate, since I've obviously lost my grip on everything. I think there's a couple ways you could take Gale saying that it's not too late to run. And actually, I'm more inclined to believe the way of thinking that's more in Gale's favor than not. But you could take this line a different way. I personally think that him saying that, it's not too late to run, I don't think he actually means that. Because Gale would have to know how difficult it would be for just him and Katniss to get over the electrified fence. And he would know there's no way for Prim or Astrid to come, not even taking into account his family. There's no way for them to be able to get Prim and Astrid into the woods too, or anybody else, because Katniss obviously wants to take Peeta and Haymitch. But even without that, even if it was just Prim and Astrid, there's no way that Katniss would ever leave Prim. I think he's more just saying, it's not too late to run, because he knows he's about to lose Katniss again, and I think he feels guilty about not listening to her, and him saying that is just a last-ditch effort that he doesn't actually believe. It's just a last desperate thing that he knows he's losing Katniss again. But on the other hand, you could also argue that Gale did mean what he was saying, and he was being selfish, because Gale is known to be selfish when it comes to Katniss. I don't believe that's what he's talking about in this moment, but you could take it that he thinks that it's not too late for him and Katniss to run, to be able to get out. And maybe he is just that desperate enough to want to save Katniss to leave everyone behind. I don't think he would leave his family behind. He knows there's no way Katniss will leave her mother and Prim behind, especially not Prim. So you could take it that way. I have problems with Gale and how he acts a lot of the time, but in this moment, I don't think that's why he said it, but you could take it that way if you wanted to. One night after Gale is helping them train by teaching them about snares, him and Katniss are walking back, and Gale says about Peeta that it would have been easier if Peeta were easier to hate, and Katniss agrees and says, that if he had been easier to hate, that she would have just been a victor all by herself. Gale then says, "And where would we be, Katniss?" asked Gale. I paused, not knowing what to say. Where would I be with my pretend cousin, who wouldn't be my pretend cousin, if it weren't for Peeta? Would he still have kissed me, and would I have kissed him back had I been free to do so? Would I have let myself open up to him, lulled by the security of money and food and the illusion of safety being a victor could bring under different circumstances? But there would have always been the reaping looming over us, over our children, no matter what I wanted. Hunting, like every Sunday, I say. I know he didn't mean the question literally. This is as much as I can honestly give him. Gale knows I chose him over Peeta when I didn't make a run for it. But she didn't, Katniss. You did not choose Gale over Peeta. She chose to stay and fight. Like I've said before, she chose to stay and fight, and she thinks that means I have to choose Gale. That means I have to be with Gale. And she thinks she can't want to be with Peeta because that's what the Capitol wants, and she doesn't want what the Capitol wants, so I can't want that. I didn't write this here, but with Katniss saying that would she have let herself open up, lulled by the security of money and food and the illusion of safety being a victor could bring under different circumstances. If Peeta had not been in the games at all, and it was just Katniss, and Katniss came back as victor, I think possibly here Katniss is thinking that her situation of being a victor and how dangerous it is because of her stunt with the berries, which it is. But even if Peeta hadn't been in the picture and she had won all by herself with any acts of rebellion against the Capitol in the games, she would not have had the illusion of safety being a victor could bring under different circumstances, because that bubble would have been burst. There's the very good possibility that had it not been for her relationship with Peeta, that she could have been sold, just like Finnick was. She's the girl on fire. Everyone loves Katniss Everdeen. So I think it's very plausible that that would have been Katniss's fate. Or if she refused, it would have been Joanna's fate. And there's no way in hell that Katniss would let the Capitol kill Prim, so I think it would have been leaning more towards Finnick's fate. Back to her and Gale's conversation, she says, "To me, there's no point in talking about things that might have been. Even if I had killed Peeta in the arena, I still wouldn't have wanted to marry anyone. I only got engaged to save people's lives, and that completely backfired." Katniss is also worried that if she upsets Gale, or if she has some kind of emotional scene with him, that might cause him to do something drastic, like start that uprising in the mines. And as Haymitch says, District 12 isn't ready for that. If anything, they're less ready than before the Quarter Quell announcement, because the following morning another 100 peacekeepers arrive on the train. And she says, "Since I don't plan on making it back alive a second time, the sooner Gale lets me go, the better. I do plan on saying one or two things to him after the reaping, when we're allowed an hour for goodbyes, to let Gale know how essential he's been to me all these years, how much better my life has been for knowing him, for loving him, even if it's only in the limited way that I can manage, but I never get that chance." I don't think, even if Peeta hadn't been in the picture, I don't really think Katniss and Gale would have got married, even if it hadn't been for the games. Maybe, but remember, Katniss just didn't want to get married at all, because marriage equals children, and she does not want that. And also, Katniss doesn't love Gale in that way either. Talking about Effie real quick, I'm so sure we're all aware there's some differences between book Effie and movie Effie, but both versions of her do care about Katniss and Peeta and Haymitch. There can be, debates on in what way that is, how much that is, why that is, but she does, at some level, care about them. And you see that in the book, too. It's not just the movie. At the reaping, Effie, shining in a wig of metallic gold, lacks her usual verve. She has to claw around the girl's reaping bowl for quite a while to snag the one piece of paper that everyone already knows has my name on it. Completely switching gears again, I'm going to talk about another symbolism in the deep dive section, and that's Moonlight. And I'm talking about it here because with my deep diving the first Hunger Games book, I found some symbolism with the Moonlight, and I wanted to bring it back up again here. I went back to when I talked about Moonlight and the symbolism, and it was my last episode covering the first Hunger Games book, which was episode 6. And basically what I had talked about was all the times that Katniss had talked about the moon and Moonlight, both in and out of the arena. And as well as that Hunger Games teacher blog that I found, off topic. I went back on there because I was going to see if she had posted anything about catching fire in Moonlight. I didn't find any. But when I got on the website, that thing I seen about Moonlight was from 2011. I got back on there and I thought that website, she had abandoned it or something, or hadn't updated it, probably since Mockingjay. But she had talked about Sunrise on the Reaping, and I was like, wait, I don't remember what she was talking about it because I just saw that she had posted about Sunrise on the Reaping, a new book coming out for Hunger Games. But yeah, on that blog, she does talk about it. But back to what I was talking about, that blog post that I talked about in episode 6 of Hunger Games, she had theorized that the moon was a symbol of Katniss's transformation. I couldn't find any posts she had talked about it for Catching Fire and beyond. I just found that one. So from what I'm thinking is, here in Catching Fire, the night the Quell is announced, Katniss is, laying in the cellar of one of the unoccupied houses in Victor's village, and she says, I curl up on my side and stare at the patches of moonlight on the cement floor. She has mentioned moon or moonlight a couple times before this moment. Once when she was about to jump over the fence after it was turned on, she says the falling snow will obscure any moonlight. And in this set of chapters when she's doing her bridal shoot, a sheath of diamonds and jeweled veil and moonlight. After that, we get a lot of mentions of moon or moonlight once we're back in the arena. Some of the things that the moon or moonlight can symbolize is change, power, and intuition. On a website called thelittlebookish.com, the author of that says that moonlight can be, quote, a mirror of emotional states, example, sadness, longing, and madness. And they also say that in Chinese and Japanese literature, the moon often represents reunion, nostalgia, and ethereal beauty of life. It is especially tied to mid-autumn festivals and poetry about separation or longing, which Katniss is about to be separated from those she loves. In Western mythology, the moon is associated with Artemis/Diana, the huntress goddess of the night, representing independence, strength, and chastity. And I'll link that website below. I think the moon could still represent transformation here in Catching Fire. Some parallels with the Reaping Day in Catching Fire and other Hunger Games books. In The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Coriolanus says that this Reaping Day, like most, was shaping up to be a scorcher, but what else could you expect on July 4th? I remember reading Ballad for the first time, and us finding out, as a Hunger Games fandom collectively, when Reaping Day was. Another parallel on Reaping Day that I'm sure we're all aware of is Peeta volunteering for Haymitch the same way that Katniss volunteered for Prim last book. This year, for the 75th Games, Katniss and Peeta are not allowed to say goodbye after they get into the Justice Building, like they were last year. Quote, we're immediately marched into the Justice Building to find Head Peacekeeper Thread waiting for us. New procedure, he says with a smile. We're ushered out the back door into a car and taken to the train station. In Sunrise on the Reaping, they're also not allowed to say their goodbyes, like they're supposed to be able to. In quote, none of that. I'm yanked back by a peacekeeper as Drusilla continues. No goodbyes for these people. They've lost that privilege after the outrageous display today. Take them straight to the train, and let's get out of this I almost said shithole. That's what she wanted to say. If this was adult, she would have said shithole. But take them straight to the train, and let's get out of this stinkhole. Let's get out of this shithole. Plutarch does end up letting Haymitch's mom and brother say a pretty quick goodbye to Haymitch in exchange for them getting reaction shots. And Merrily also manages to slip past some peacekeepers to give Maisie a final hug before they're separated by peacekeepers. The last little bit of foreshadowing I'm going to cover in this set of chapters is just this very tiny moment that happens in this set of chapters that foreshadows something that also happens later in the set of chapters. In chapter 12, when Katniss goes to Haymitch's house before they go to walk into town, Katniss tells us readers that Haymitch isn't flat out drunk, but he doesn't look that steady either, and says, I guess the rumors about Ripper being back in business are true. That sets up for chapter 13 when Katniss and Haymitch get drunk, because remember, Ripper was in the stocks, he couldn't get alcohol, so that's showing us this is why Haymitch has alcohol again. Ripper's back out of the stocks. And it also, after the Quell announcement, why Peeta went to Ripper and paid her off and threatened her, do not sell any liquor to Katniss or Haymitch, and threatened to turn her into the Peacekeepers where she'd have to go back in the stocks that she just got out of. On to Symbolism. I did debate on putting the Symbolism for Maisie Donner's name here, but I'm going to wait till next episode, because that's where Katniss and Peeta actually see her during Haymitch's games, and she's just briefly mentioned here. So I'm going to save that for next episode. So no name symbolisms right now, but for things mentioned in the set of chapters and their symbolisms, pink roses can symbolize sweetness, femininity, grace, joy, and gentleness. Pearls, which I know I've covered before, but they can represent purity, transformation, love, innocence, and new beginnings. Transformation, and that's literally what Katniss's dress with the pearls does, is transform into the Mockingjay dress. Ivory, which represents purity, innocence, and elegance. Wikipedia also says that in Western culture, it's associated with weddings, obviously. Satin represents luxury, elegance, and wealth. Lace can represent chastity and debauchery, elegance and power, and status. White silk can represent transformation, a fresh start or change, and purity. And finally, diamonds, which I'm pretty sure I've covered before also, can symbolize strength, enduring love, but also power and status. For quotes, I did a lot of quotes in this episode. I was just going beat by beat. But the only quote that I put here is from when Katniss is listening to Snow talk about the 25th Hunger Games, the first quarter Quell, about them voting on who the tributes were going to be for that twist. And she says, "It's worse, I think, to be turned over by your own neighbors than having your name drawn from the reaping bowl." It's worse, I think, to be turned over by your own neighbors. Just really, it really made me think of just real life. That's the only separate quote that wasn't in the deep dive section I wanted to point out. For the book to movie changes, the reaping is a little different. In the movie, we see the District 12 salute happen at the reaping. In the book, that doesn't happen. In the movie, Prim and Astrid give Katniss and Peeta the three-finger salute, and that triggers everyone in the crowd to do it too. And then Katniss and Peeta return that gesture as well. That's a slight change from the book. I did really like that change they made. I'm sure part of it is because it gives it more action for the movie, but it also parallels really well with the first book. In the book, it's not until Katniss and Peeta are in the Justice Building that they learn they're not going to be able to say goodbye. In the movie, we get that scene of Thread coming, grabbing Katniss's arm, and then taking him into the Justice Building, and Prim screaming for Katniss, and Katniss yelling, goodbye. That was another change, I did like. The training for the games that Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch do are all gone in the movie. They really smushed the timeline in the movie. Like I said, it was in April that they did the reading of the card, and then the reaping is July 4th. So we had all that time of them training. So they had months for training, and it's pretty much just fast forwarded straight to the reaping. In the movie, Katniss runs into the woods after the Quell announcement, but in the book, because the fence is turned back on, she turns back around after running towards the fence and goes into the cellar of an empty Victor's Village house. Haymitch's famous line of, "I think these games are going to be different," that they've been using in the Sunrise on the Reaping trailer, is actually not in the book. It's only in the movie when Katniss and Haymitch are drinking. The scene of Peeta dumping out all of Haymitch's liquor is gone in the movie, and that whole scene of them the day after the quarter Quell announcement is gone. Katniss's bridal shower shoot is not in the movie. In the movie, this is a very slight change, but I've seen Catching Fire so many times. Like, I have it memorized at this point. In the movie, when Snow announces the twist for the quarter Quell, you can hear Prim a little bit in the background say, "What does he mean?" After Snow reads the card, and Astrid, you can hear her crying. And Katniss, gets up and runs away and runs out. In the book, Prim understands what he means, straight away, because she puts her head in her hands. While in the book, Katniss is still processing, and Prim understands what he says. Of course, Astrid mentioning that she had a friend that went the year of the 50th Hunger Games, Maisley Donner, and all of that is gone. Katniss was at Haymitch's and comes home drunk, all of that's gone. And the next day of Prim and Astrid helping take care of her, that's gone. Lastly, for the book to movie changes I'm going to cover, is Katniss and Haymitch's conversation about the uprisings in District 13 are not in the movie. That is it for this week's episode of District Deep Dive. Next episode, I'll be covering chapters 14 and 15 in Catching Fire. We'll get to meet a whole bunch of new characters. We'll get to meet a lot of victors. But a reminder again, there won't be a new episode next week. It'll be the week after when I'll start covering chapters 14 and 15 because I will be on vacation. So that'll be posted the week of the 20th. It won't be on the 20th. It'll just be the week of the 20th. I feel like I just had a couple weeks where I wasn't able to post, but that was not my fault. That was the fault of possible black mold. This one is my fault because I didn't have time to write, film, and edit a second episode, and I didn't want to rush it either because we're meeting a lot of new characters. This episode is already long because I like to yap, because I have a lot to say about the Hunger Games, obviously. That's why I have a deep dive series on it. I'm literally days away from leaving, and I have to edit this and pack. So I'm sorry. Hopefully when I get back, I can get on a more consistent schedule, and things won't just keep coming up, and I'll be able to actually, get ahead. But anyway, I'm going to quit rambling now. Make sure whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening in the podcast version, you turn on notifications so you get notified when I post a new episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Or if you're listening to this in the podcast version, please don't forget to rate, review, and follow. Don't forget to follow me and the show on TikTok and Instagram. I have it all linked below, as well as my YouTube channel if you're listening, or the podcast if you're watching. Thank you guys again so much for watching or listening and just supporting the series. I will see you all next episode. Bye, guys.